Welcome, everyone. We are just letting folks into the webinar. So I'm Nyla Boodoo, RNS events host. I know people are just coming in, so I just want to say hello as folks are coming in, and thank you for coming today. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to our second edition of our summer virtual event series. And today we are going to be, of course, talking about religious responses and faith-based lawsuits during the second Trump administration. As we let people in, if you want to state in the chat where you are joining us from, it's always nice to see. And I know our panelists also love to see. Oh, and I see it's good. This is great. All of our regulars are already putting in the chat where they are from. So thank you. But it's so nice to see people from all over the country and from all different faith traditions, as I see here. So thank you. We have everybody from both. So far I see every coast, which is great.
I'm catching some UK people, so we have international too, which is exciting.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So this is great. And as we also, just like as you're already using the chat function, just know that after Aleja is going to be leading our conversation, and then we will be taking your questions. So please make sure to also use the chat function for all of these questions as well. Our events producers will also be monitoring the chat. And after our moderated conversation with our panelists, who I do want to introduce, we will take all of your questions. I do want to note to everyone, this event is being recorded, as you were probably alerted to as you entered the Zoom. We are going to be sharing this, so we would also love from tomorrow for you to reshare the conversation for people who could not make it. Again, I'm Nyla Boodoo, and I'm here in Washington, D.C., along with RNS reporter Aleja Hertzler-McCain, who, as hopefully many of you know, because she's been doing an amazing job covering so much of the news of these lawsuits and different faith-based responses to the second Trump administration. And we're very excited to welcome our other panelists to this conversation as well. We have with us Presiding Bishop of the Episcopal Church, Sean Rowe, the Reverend Carlos Malave of the Latino Christian National Network, and Liz Reiner Platt, who's director of the Law, Rights, and Religion Project at Columbia Law School. So as I mentioned, I know folks are still coming in. This is the second of a series of virtual events we're going to be doing this summer for RNS, leading up to our in-person fall symposium. Next month, I will be joined by RNS Vatican correspondent Claire Giangrave and a few other experts as we discuss first impressions of our new American Pope, Bishop Rowe. I know you are just back from that inauguration. We will put a link in the chat for you to register for that event. That will be June 24th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Before I turn it over to Aleja, one last housekeeping note. We are so excited that you and our guests are here, and we are very grateful for your support of our journalism. And we're looking forward to a lively and respectful conversation. I do want to remind everybody that RNS has a zero tolerance policy for abusive language. And so please keep your comments civil and on topic with today's discussion. Aleja, let me turn it over to you.
So grateful to be here with all of you and looking forward to having a conversation. I know that we were just talking before the webinar started that Bishop Rowe is in an airport, having just come back from the papal inauguration. And I know one person there with him was South African Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, and who we know has thanked you publicly for your decision to rescind the refugee resettlement agreement with the US government after being asked to resettle white Afrikaners. But I'm curious, what did he share with you in person, Bishop Rowe?
Yes, thank you for having me. Well, I was able to have a good conversation with the Archbishop about the situation and about our longtime partnership. And both of us expressed our fraternity with each other, our two churches, which have a long history. The Episcopal Church was early to oppose apartheid and has been a partner with Desmond Tutu and his successors, including Bishop Thabo. What we're talking about in this particular situation is the reality that really Afrikaners don't fit any definition of refugee. And so Bishop Tabo and I were talking about all of the violence that's happening on the continent of Africa and how sad it is that others can't be relocated, but that this particular population has jumped the line, and how really what we're talking about here is a real distortion of the facts and the truth. And we were lamenting that truth is seems to be more relative these days, and but our need to be in continued solidarity and partnership with each other.
Can you share a little bit more about your own discernment process about ending the partnership with the US government, which you all have been in for quite a long time? How has it fit into your broader discernment process for how to approach the Trump administration? Are there particular types of prayer you're relying on?
Well, I mean, I think the key in this case is to have a critical framework of moral decision making, and to be strategic in the ways in which we stand up for the truth and what is right. I think institutional resistance is now more important than ever. The church may be one of the few institutions that will be able to stand up and to tell the truth along the way, not to fold to demands and continue to be asked to make compromises on our moral decision making. In this case, it was fairly straightforward. We have a group of people who are basically essentially the architects of apartheid. They are by no means persecuted. Certainly, times are difficult in South Africa. That's for sure. But they don't meet any definition of a refugee. And more importantly, they jumped the line. We have people who helped our United States military who are real patriots, Afghans, others who are waiting to be resettled, people who are facing violence in Congo, all of which are waiting in camps, dying every day. And to have the whole program shut down and then allow really 50 rather privileged people by the world standards in, which is something we couldn't do. Now, some people said, well, hey, presiding bishop, you ought to just do this, because then we can resettle other refugees. Maybe this will give us a chance. But the problem with any kind of Faustian bargain like that is that the devil always wins. See? And so we knew that if we did this, we were going to be asked to do something else we couldn't do. And so this was the line that we had to draw, and we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to tell the truth and be on the side of moral decision making. And that's what this is about. Just because the Trump administration and others have lost their way doesn't mean the church has.
Speaking of kind of the difficult decision making that comes into meeting the moment, Pastor Carlos, last time we spoke, I was at the Latino Christian National Network gathering, and it was less than a month after the inauguration, and leaders there were describing really significant fear in congregations over potential immigration raids. And you all were trying to provide congregations with some guidelines on how to respond. So now that you've had a few more months under your belt, what's changed about how congregations are what they're experiencing? Is there still the same level of fear?
Yeah, thank you, Aleja. I can tell you that just even before the inauguration, when we knew that President Trump has won the elections, we began to feel strongly the reverberations of the way that the president was obviously very clear going to conduct all these things. And I do remember, and I'll be quick with this, I do remember that right at the day after the election, I flew to Panama to do a visit with Christian leaders from the U.S. to what is called the Darien jungle and the Darien Gap. And we were there for about a week. And when we were there, we began to listen, to hear all the rhetoric that was coming immediately after the election from the president and from leaders of the party. When I was there, I got a call from a a pastor who's a member of our network. And this is a pastor who is a member or a pastor in a quite conservative denomination. As I don't know if all of you know, but our network is composed of people with very divergent positions, theological traditions. And so this was a Pentecostal, very conservative pastor. And he called me while I was there in Panama, and he was so alarmed. His question immediately was, Pastor Carlos, what are we going to do about what we are hearing coming out of the message of the president? I'll be very honest with you. My gut reaction immediately was to tell this person, well, your denomination supported for the most part the president. And why are you now concerned? Because you should have known that this was coming. Obviously, I didn't answer him in that way. And I told him, well, we are already thinking the ways in which we're going to do this. One of the ways that we were already thinking was to create several seminars that we did, in which we educated members of our church on how to face this situation. And the immediate reaction, and this is not news to probably none of you, was that at least the Latino immigrants went into a mode of real deep concern and fear to what was coming. And that was actually what was conveyed by this pastor to me. But then we began to listen here and there throughout the country, the level of alarm that our people began to experience by what they were hearing. So this has changed a little bit. I guess if we have time, I want to stop here, but this has changed a little bit, but that's what we felt at the very beginning.
Thank you for kind of taking us back to the level of crisis really a lot of congregations were in right at the beginning. And one of the things that was interesting when I was at your meeting was the discussions about what advice you all had for congregations on how to respond. I'm curious, has your advice to congregations evolved since the first month rather?
Well, the situation, interestingly enough, the situation has slightly changed. And that is because at the beginning, the first month or so, up until the inauguration of the president, we began to hear about large numbers of people who did not want to go to church. They were fearful about going to schools, sending their children. They were fearful about going to hospitals, public places. And so that was the immediate reaction for most people. And that has to do, obviously, with the fact that we decided to join other churches, religious groups, and organizations, including, I believe, the Episcopal Church, in the lawsuit that we were part of. And so it has changed a little bit now, and I think I'm glad to report, although this that I'm going to say, although it's something that we must ponder about, and that is that our people have come now to a point where they know that the danger is out there for ICE to come to those sensitive locations and take people with them. But now, interestingly enough, people have kind of eased down. And the reason why they have done that is because they're acting now based on their faith. And what I mean by that is that people have had some time to reflect. And so they have come to think, yes, there's danger out there, but I'm in God's hands. My family is in God's hands. And so now there is a level of trust, not in the authorities, not in the administration, a higher level of trust in that our lives are in God's hands, and people are still careful on the moves that they do, they take. But people are actually coming back to church because the way they think is, who is going to preclude me to come to church? Why should I give up to any human and power that is trying to take away this right that I have to worship? So,
Bishop Rowe, I'm curious, is that kind of what you've heard from Episcopal congregations, that people are feeling that their faith is moving them to go back to church, even if they were afraid at the beginning?
Yeah, I think more and more people are digging deep into faith, and that's let's leading them back. I would concur.
So we're really excited to have Liz here as well, and she's going to help us kind of fill in the legal perspective here. And so based on some of the concerns we're hearing, especially at the beginning, where people were not coming to church, the three different groups of faith, or faith groups, have filed three different lawsuits. That's probably a better way to put it. Challenging a Trump administration policy that removed restrictions on immigration raids at places of worship. Including a lawsuit organized by Georgetown University that both the Latino Christian National Network and the Episcopal Church are participating in. So Liz, can you share a bit about the legal arguments that these groups are relying on? All three of them have cited the First Amendment of the US Constitution, the Administrative Procedure Act, and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Yeah, absolutely. So laid it out exactly right. There's been this policy in place for about 30 years that prevented at least some forms of immigration enforcement at houses of worship and religious ceremonies, among other sensitive locations. I believe Trump's first day in office, he revoked that policy and replaced it with what he said was like appeals to common sense, which isn't a lot of guidance. And so we've seen these three separate lawsuits. There are three lawsuits, but there's many, many more religious groups involved, because some of the one of the lawsuits has, I think, three different religious Quaker groups, a Sikh Gurdwara, and a Baptist organization. Another, the Georgetown lawsuit has, I believe, 27 different religious groups, including Christian and Jewish groups. And then the last one also has a few different religious, so many, many different denominations represented. And as you said, the First Amendment claim that they are appealing to is actually not freedom of religion, but freedom of association. And then the religion claim is based on, as you said, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Most people think of religious freedom as protected in the First Amendment. Of course it is, but actually the most robust protection for against infringements of religious freedom by the federal government is not the Constitution at this point. It is a federal statute called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And I will, if you'll bear with me, I can go through that test and take you all to law school with me for a moment, which is that the federal government is not allowed to place a substantial burden on your religious exercise unless it can show that that burden it's placing on you is narrowly tailored, in other words, necessary to advance a compelling government interest. So I just threw a lot of legalese at you, and I won't go through every aspect of that test. But basically, it provides a really, really strong right to be free from unnecessary infringements on your religious practice. And the argument here is that by essentially making these religious groups afraid to be open to the public and open and welcoming and take all comers, they're forcing these religious groups into a kind of a no-win situation where they have to close their doors and shut down and put up barriers in order to protect their congregations, which itself is a violation of their religious belief, right? So they're caught in this kind of catch-22. So that's the legal argument. One of the cases was just filed, so we haven't gotten any decision in that one yet. And then the other two, so far, this is just at the very early litigation stage. There haven't been any trials. It's all very early, but we've seen two different results in those other two cases. So in one of the cases, the court did grant a preliminary injunction for the religious organizations. So basically, ICE has to operate as if the sensitive locations is still in effect for those churches. In the other case, and this is the Georgetown case that I believe you both are members of, they did not say that it's perfect, it's not a religious liberty violation for ICE to come in. They didn't even get that far. All the court said was, we don't have standing at this stage because we don't think that there's strong evidence that ICE is actually doing anything to these churches. Essentially, to have standing, you have to show we are being harmed right now. And the judge said, there haven't, ICE isn't really coming into churches. We're not really seeing evidence that at this stage, there's enough immediate right now harm being created that we're gonna grant this preliminary injunction. But that's still, I mean, there's a lot more litigation left to go. Bishop Rowe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Liz, I was going to ask you about that, that the whole question of standing. It seems like, the only way we could do that is to have people who maybe don't have documentation to somehow swear to the court that this is problematic for them. And that seems like they would paint a target on them. I mean, how does this work? How do you actually get standing? How do you actually prove that people are afraid to go? How would this actually happen? Like, realistically, how would we even do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, data or stories or more information that shows that people are staying home. And, I don't know that I would say I'm not a master in like the rules of evidence. I don't know that you would need to disclose their names necessarily. I mean, I think just if you said something like we did a poll and we heard that, X number of people are not coming to church anymore because they're afraid to be there. Or certainly if there was more evidence, like if more stories start coming out of ICE engaging and coming to religious, like there have been a couple incidents of ICE already coming to churches. I know there was one incident in Georgia, but I guess that was not enough for the judge. But maybe if there are more incidents, that would be enough. So I think there's definitely room to come back. I'll say, like, I think some of the media was a bit misleading, and it made it sound like the judge had issued a decision that it's perfectly fine for ICE to go into churches. Again, it was much narrower than that. At the same time, I think that the judge took a narrower view of standing than I've seen to just put a point on it, some of the cases brought by more conservative religious institutions and organizations. So, for example, I can give you. If you all might know the 303 Creative case that was at the Supreme Court recently. This was a web designer who said it was against her religious belief to create a website for a same-sex couple. The court, there was no issue of standing in that case, and yet she had never been asked to create a website. She actually hadn't been created a wedding website, I believe, at that point for anyone, didn't advertise wedding website cases. There was no lawsuit against her. And the state in that case was unclear on whether it would ever try to enforce that law against her, and the court didn't have an issue of standing. So I think standing, like many legal concepts, it's a bit malleable, and we don't necessarily always see consistency in what's an immediate threat. There was apparently an immediate threat for her to create a website for a same-sex couple, and no immediate threat of ICE enforcement in this case. But
if I may have a very quick follow-up question also. In this particular, in our case, the judge ruled, and then she came back and asked us to provide more written testimonies. My thought was, shouldn't she rule based on the principle? And it doesn't seem like she did that. So I don't know, what's your take on that?
well, it's the principle informed by the facts and the evidence. So it's hard to, I mean, I think I would maybe need to know a little bit more about what evidence was already provided, but it is a principle, but it's a principle as applied to facts, if that makes sense.
That was so cool to get to watch you all kind of ask questions of each other and draw on each other's experiences. We have a question from the chat that kind of ties into something that I've been wanting to hear about. And one of the conversations that was, I think, more prevalent in the first Trump administration was about the idea of sanctuary in churches. And I'm curious to hear from Liz how the legal strategies or even rhetorical strategies you're seeing religious groups use this second Trump administration are different from the first administration, first time. And can you give a bit of an explanation of how sanctuary relates to the law?
Sure, that's a big question, so I'll do my best to answer it. So
Sorry.
that's okay. The sanctuary movement originated back in the 1980s with churches, religious groups helping to bring in refugees escaping violence in Central America, helped in some cases even drive them across the border into the country, house them, provide them with legal resources. And they actually did have a couple lawsuits. They were federally prosecuted by the Reagan administration, and brought a religious liberty defense, which failed. But religious liberty law was much weaker at that time. So I made that might have been too much backstory, but it is an interesting history. There was then a new sanctuary movement that got started around, I think, like 2017, or I don't know, I shouldn't say the dates, but there was a new sanctuary movement, and there was some litigation during the first Trump administration around. I don't know that they would have necessarily defined themselves, frankly, as sanctuary activists or activists at all, but there was some litigation from faith-based groups doing immigration work in the first Trump administration, most notably some cases brought by volunteers with the organization No More Deaths, who again were prosecuted by the Trump administration for leaving food and water in the desert for migrants, basically saying, like, we don't want to see people die in our backyards. We don't want to see people die of dehydration and hunger as they're crossing the border. They were prosecuted for that, and they again brought a religious liberty defense under the RFRA this time, because it had passed in 1993, and those cases actually won. So there were 3 different cases. There were 2 of those No More Deaths cases. There's also a case by Pastor Kajidosa, who successfully argued that she had a religious liberty right to go and to minister to migrants in Mexico. The government had tried to prevent her, had sent an email to the Mexican government basically saying, don't let this pastor in. And she said that was a religious liberty violation and won. I would say maybe a difference this time around in terms of the legal strategy, and I can't speak to the larger activist or moral strategy at all. I'm really just the legal eagle in the room, so I'd love to hear from the others. But I'd say a difference is I think those cases were often a little bit slapdash and kind of done in a way that would, like, they were, I mean, I think there's a much more of a wide scale institutional interest in these religious liberty arguments that I didn't see in the first Trump administration. Those are kind of individual activists who were doing this in response to prosecution, and were using every tool in their toolkit to protect their faith-based activism, but they didn't seek it out. They didn't go in saying, I want to find a litigator and do this religious liberty lawsuit. This time I'm seeing much more of a kind of the groups coming and say, like, no, this is our institutional religious liberty rights, and you are violating it, and we are going to take affirmative steps to protect them. I hope that all was kind of clear. It was, whereas last, it was just a little bit more, it wasn't kind of a affirmative thing that folks were doing last time, or that I saw last time around. I actually would love to ask a question of Bishop Rowe, if that's okay. So, hearing all of this talk about lawsuits, one thing that struck to mind, and you can tell me why this was off the table or not a strategy you were interested in. I, as a lawyer, have seen a lot of litigation recently of, again, particularly conservative Christian groups that have large grants from the government, and yet have brought litigation saying, we want to take the grant, but we don't want to serve LGBTQ families. We want to take the grant, but we don't want to offer reproductive health services as part of this grant, things like that. And I was wondering if you had ever discussed the possibility or had any interest or thought in a legal strategy of saying it violates our religious liberty rights to resettle people in this way, in this community that we don't think are kind of deserve the refugee status, if that was something that you considered as following that kind of legal exemption route.
Yeah, so thanks. We thought about a number of options here. It's particularly related to the contract that we have with the federal government and the terms of that contract. So we were one of 10 um, agencies or organizations that resettle refugees. So we had a particular contract with the federal government that required us to settle whomever they sent to us. We had conversation with them about not settling Afrikaners. It was clear that if we chose not to, or we would be in violation of that contract. And as a person who likes to at least pretend we still have rule of law in this country, we wanted to make sure that if we were going to be in violation of the contract, that we did the honorable thing, and that is negotiate an end to that contract. So it was purely as a matter of the contractual agreement did not give us the space to do that, and we felt like we had to honor what we'd agreed to do and what we have been doing for the last 40 years. So it would have been possible we'd have been in violation of our contract, and I wasn't willing to do that either.
I appreciate the historical perspective that Liz brought in, and also the moment to kind of, work through a little bit more of your discernment, Bishop Rowe. So I'd love to hear from Pastor Carlos first, and then maybe Bishop Rowe again, about how you're defining success right now with your present legal strategies, and more broadly, what are your goals going forward and how you approach the Trump administration this second time around. Let's start with Pastor Carlos, please.
Yeah, I think that the route that we've taken is to educate. And so we are educating our church members about their rights and making sure that they receive all the information they need in whatever the situation that happened. The church is being mobilized in. Let me give you one example. In having, for example, families who be willing to take children if their parents are sent away. And so that's a very complicated proposition, but that shows to what extent the church in general is committed to our families and to the well-being of children particularly. And so that is happening all throughout the country. There are many places where church-related organizations have a group of people who have been trained to provide protection to families, to have chaperones that will go to hospital or to doctor, to different places. Church members will go with families. People who will go to do translation more intensely now, and to provide translation to people. So we are actually very intensively educating our people and providing for our people ways in which, if they are directly affected, they have resources and at least their families are well taken care of.
And Bishop Rowe, one thing we haven't, I'm curious to hear you address all of those questions, but also we haven't brought up is that there's pretty much two categories of lawsuits that faith-based groups have taken against the Trump administration. And they've joined lawsuits on other issues, but there have been the ones against the sensitive locations policy that you all here have joined. And then there have also been lawsuits by refugee resettlement agencies, faith-based ones, of course, saying that the Trump administration has violated contracts with them in essentially shuttering most refugee resettlement in the US. And so I'm curious to hear what success looks like to you, and also maybe why the Episcopal Church, back when some groups were doing those refugee resettlement lawsuits, why the Episcopal Church didn't join there.
Well, I think part particularly in this time, it's important to be strategic. In times like these, institutions may be the last bulwark against injustice, and we all can't be a part of every lawsuit. If we all responded to every executive order that came out, that's all we would do. So we have to be strategic in how we participate and the ways in which we think we can be most effective in making systemic change. And I think that is the key, is discernment and grounding. And so that means everything that comes down the road isn't something that we're going to be able to join and be a part of. We want to be strategic in our efforts. I think we may be, like I said, we may be the last bulwark against injustice. So many institutions, law firms, others are folding. The church is not going to do that. I know Dietrich Bonhoeffer is often invoked in these times, but I think it's instructive to say that what he was thinking about in the time of the confessing church was that ethics for this time are not universal. They're particular. And what that means is that they arise out of our own grounding in Christ in the here and now. And so those who are leading institutions are called to discern how to respond, how to resist, how to make the next right step. And the fact of the matter is that in the past, the church has not done a great job at resistance. We've always gotten to the game late. And I think now we have an opportunity to stand up, to stand firm. And yes, it's going to cost us something along the way. But we also have to be strategic. Otherwise, we're a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. We are interested in making change and being a lever for change and providing what I think is most critical in this time, and that is institutional resistance to what is happening in the world around us, particularly in this country.
Aleja, if I may just add something quick.
Absolutely.
I talk and I mentioned education, and one aspect of education that we are seeing throughout the country, particularly with more conservative evangelical and conservative Pentecostal leaders, is that they are starting, not all of them. We will always have staunch fundamentalists that will never change their mind, but we're starting to see, thanks to this education that we are doing, we're starting to see those evangelical Pentecostal conservative leaders rethinking the decisions that they have done, and that is good. This is good. I mean, they have been forced to go back and step back and say, okay, what did we do? What did we do? Because now they are feeling in their own flesh, their own people is feeling the effects of this evil that we are experiencing in our country. And there are many who are opening their eyes. I can give you examples, we don't have the time, of different locations throughout our country where different groups who are, some of them are related to us, others are not, that are starting to see this change in the mentality of many of these evangelicals who are more conservative, and realizing that there is more than LGBTQ issues, and there is more than abortion issues. There is a larger justice issues in our country, and there are many who are opening their eyes to that.
Thank you so much for adding that little bit of insight. Let's wrap up my questions just with one last question to Liz, which would be, can you give us a little bit of a preview of what might be on the horizon with religious liberty arguments and the Trump administration going forward?
Sure. I mean, you're just going to get my pure speculation. I'll give you that warning. But one potential lawsuit that I've been sort of wondering if it's going to happen is religious resistance to these attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion. So I could see, for example, religious universities or other institutions, or particularly there's been, I think, sort of general comments to this effect from certain Jesuit universities in particular around, we actually have a religious commitment to diversity. We have a religious commitment to equality. And so I could see that sort of litigation tactic being used to the extent some of these religious schools are are receiving some of these wild letters we've seen saying, you know, you have to tamp down on DEI efforts. So that's one that I have on my radar. We've seen some litigation at the state level that I could see potentially having like parallel lawsuits at the federal level, depending on what happens, you know, what executive orders we continue to see. So there's been a handful of mostly state lawsuits arguing for a religious liberty right to access or perform abortion care. And, you know, to the extent that there are federal efforts to, for example, criminalize the abortion pill, or I don't kind of don't want to, you know, speak any of this stuff into existence, but if there's like, I could see some of those state religious right to abortion or to provide abortion care, you know, potentially happening. Also a religious right to access or to provide trans affirming care. I know that there are certainly, I mean, I know myself of religious leaders who have trans kids and absolutely feel a moral and a religious obligation to get their children the care, the health care that they need. So that's another one I could see happening down the line. And there's I guess I'll flag one other case that's happening now out of Arizona, which is a state religious freedom lawsuit, basically in response to protesters being arrested outside of a weapons manufacturing plant related to that has been sending weapons to Gaza. To Israel rather, and they've been prosecuted and are saying that this is actually their religious obligation to protest these facilities. So I'll just give you a handful of things that have been sort of on my mind, but if others have thoughts, I would be very interested to hear those as well.
Well, I'm going to actually turn it over to Nyla, who's been monitoring all the interesting questions coming from our attendees. And I'm sure she's going to lead us to more great topics of discussion. And I guess I can also jump in and answer questions here too,
Yes.
right, Nyla?
Yes,
Okay.
that's why you're turning it over to me. So you can also, I'm going to direct questions to you too, Aleja. Thank you. Thank all of you, and as well as everybody who's participating very actively in the comments, and Bishop Rowe, who's in the comments and the panel all at the same time. We have so many people who are asking questions that I've switched to ask if you can use the Q&A function, please, just because there's so much happening in the chat. So if you missed my, please go ahead and, I see some of you saw that, but please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. But let me start with someone who had a question before I instituted that new rule. Sophie wrote in and said, I've interviewed some faith-based organizations who say they've begun to have difficulty finding firms willing to represent them after President Trump began taking actions against law firms. Can any of you speak to whether that's a challenge that you have been encountering, or if this is more difficult than it used to be?
That's not something that we've experienced at this point. You know, I've heard tell of that, like you're the person asking the question, but that's not something we've experienced as a church.
Liz, I don't know if you have a better handle on that.
So I've again similar, like I've heard that. We don't work a ton with firms, so I wouldn't be on the front line of seeing that. But I've definitely heard from colleagues who do immigrants' rights work that they have had a harder time finding firms to work with.
We have a question from Mark in the chat to Bishop Rowe. And this question says, between the wonderful gospel message preached by Bishop Buddy and our immigrant decisions, the church may become a lightning rod. While I am fine with that, are we prepared for that possibility as a national church?
Yes, we're preparing for that possibility, that we're targeted. And that, you know, people are worried about tax exempt status and other
Which
sorts
was
of
another
things.
question we had, if you are anticipating that.
Absolutely. But, you know, I think that's really going to be in from a legal standpoint, kind of an all-out war. When it's going after tax exempt status, that's going to be I'm not quite as afraid of that. I think there's going to be some other ways that the administration may choose to retaliate or target the Episcopal Church, but we're running scenarios. We're prepared as we can be in this time. We understand how grudges are held these days and how those are worked out against institutions, and we'll be as prepared as we can. And discipleship is costly. This is the reality. It's going to cost us something, and we're not used to that particularly as a privileged institution like the Episcopal Church. And hopefully we can stand the test of time. But yes, we're prepared and we're ready. We have to speak out. This is the kingdom of God. It's not the kingdom of this world. And that the church is too used to its establishment and its privileged status. And we may have to take a turn learning what it's like not to be in that position. And I don't claim it's going to be easy. But
Reverend, thank you for that, Bishop. Reverend Malave, is there anything else you wanted to add on that front as well, in terms of just thinking about the cost or reacting to what Bishop Rowe is saying?
Let me say a couple of things. One is obviously, if we go back to the lawsuit, for us, it was a very difficult process. I can tell you that there were other Latino Christian organizations who ponder about joining the lawsuit, and they decided not to. And I don't blame them because their fear was repercussion, and especially from IRS. And I am very pleased that our board was anonymous in taking action. And so we said, no, we are all in. This is not something that we are going to shy from. And so I'm glad that we did this. One thing that I like to mention, and I regret that I don't have all the details. I was just looking on my phone just momentarily now, but I couldn't find it right away. But I have one of our leaders who's a lawyer, and he sent to us some information that there is, and again, I cannot pinpoint exactly where, but there is right now in the package that Congress is working on for the budget, there is buried there language that would allow Congress to have more tools to work or change the non-for-profit status of organizations. So we've been made aware of that Congress has some language there. I mean, I do have somewhere the specific information of where that is, but it is buried in this package that they are voting on, and so that is a real possibility out there. And just echoing the bishop words. We, in our particular case, our Latino network, we have our ministry and our ethos and our work as being to bring about Christians from different theological perspective and different traditions. And obviously, part of what we are called to do is to build bridges among those people and work for the peace and the unity, not only of the church, but our nation. And here where it's very difficult, because we continue to be committed to that, but it is very difficult. It is very difficult in this current time. And so we are taking the route of saying, yes, that's our vocation, and we will continue to do that, but we will not be silent. We will not be silent. We can't.
Pastor Carlos, I really appreciate you saying that, because that actually leads really well into a question that Jane just asked to Bishop Rowe. What is the Episcopal Church hearing from their Republican members about the lawsuits and the policies of the Trump administration? Do these members feel betrayed or unhappy with the church, or are they supporting these lawsuits?
Do you mind if I jump in really quick with a little bit
sure.
of factual information?
Yeah.
I just thought, because some people might be really concerned about the nonprofit
the tax
language
exempt.
and right.
Yeah.
And so actually that was something that a lot of people were concerned about, but it was removed from the bill text in news that broke yesterday. So I think just worth
thank you.
adding that in. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
Good.
so that answers that previous question from Pastor Carlos. Can I go back to Pastor Carlos, your point about just the idea of the church and unity in the country, and to Jane's question to you, Bishop Rowe, about Republican members of the Episcopal Church and how they're reacting and responding to all of this?
Well, this isn't
What
about.
you're hearing.
Sure. I
Yeah.
mean, we're hearing positive and negative from people on all sides. I mean, there are people that agree with this, people that don't. Largely, we're hearing from people who are supportive, but I've heard from plenty of people who identify as Republicans who think we're doing the right thing here. This is not about party politics. This is about moral decision making. We've had issues. We had issues with the Biden administration, with the Obama administration, with deportations in those times. So this is not about being a Republican or Democrat. And I say to people, this isn't anti-Trump. This is about moral decision making. And we don't care who the incumbent of the office is. It happens to be someone who tends in a particular way, but this is about our baptismal covenant and about respecting the dignity of every human being. So I say to people, this isn't party politics. So stop making it about party politics. This isn't what this is about. That's a distraction.
We have a completely different question. Liz, this is for you. It's from Caroline Dunleavy, who says, I'm a member of the UCC, and we have been advised that the national denomination would have difficulty joining in a lawsuit because of our congregational polity. Can Liz speak to this? Does denominational structure impact the ability of a group to participate in these lawsuits?
I don't know that it would prevent them from being a party. I think it might just be that it's hard to get there. It's hard to get the group to like internally. It sounds like it might just be an issue of like decision-making process.
Oh, so you're talking about just within the denominational structure to come to a decision to decide to do a
That's my
lawsuit?
best understanding of the question.
There are some denominations in our conversations about these lawsuits that felt that because of their particular polity, which is more congregational, that they were not able to join at the denominational level. So what this person is asking from the UCC has been asked from other perspectives as well, and counsel for those denominations has advised them that given their polity that they can't join as a denomination in some cases.
Okay. We also had a question. This is just asking about hospital chapels in terms of ICE and immigration, and where does all of this fit in? Do hospital chapels, Liz, can you kind of shed some light on that, where hospital chapels fit into the religious liberty and the law?
It's an interesting question. So the one case where they did successfully get a preliminary injunction, it only applied to the plaintiffs in that case. And I don't think that any of the particular plaintiffs in that case would be running a hospital chaplain if they have a hospital chapel. So I don't think I don't see how the decision in that case would have any bearing. There may be a future sensitive location. I mean, because hospitals and healthcare settings are another place that was protected by the initial sensitive locations memo. So hospitals in and of themselves could potentially have standing, not under religious freedom protections necessarily, but could try to bring a suit, restoring the sensitive locations policy. I don't know that they have. I don't believe they have as of yet. But
We've
they
talked
wouldn't
about
be covered by any of the existing lawsuits.
Okay, thanks, Liz. We have talked about so many things. I see one last question I want to get to that a bunch of people are asking about, and then I want to give all of you time, our panelists, to just share any final thoughts. But we got this question from Kim. Are religious institutions included in lawsuits opposing the Trump administration's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship for children born in the U.S. to parents who were not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents? And we've had a couple folks asking about that in the chat and in questions.
What is the specific question? I'm sorry again.
If churches, if they're religious institutions, if you all are thinking about being involved in opposition to the Trump administration's attempt to end birthright citizenship.
From our part, we have not had that conversation yet. So.
I don't think so.
Well, we tend to be in favor of the Constitution, which supports birthright citizenship. So, there it is.
All right. Okay, thanks, Bishop Rowe. I just want to remind everybody before we get to final thoughts from our panelists that we do have our next event will be coming up in June. There's a link that was put in the chat. That will actually be about a check-in on first impressions of Pope Leo and with our Vatican correspondent, Claire Giangrave. So that will be on June 23rd. That link was just put in the chat for you to register. But let me I know there's been so many different things that we have talked about in this hour, and I just wanted to end by just asking, I know, Pastor Carlos, you wanted to share some final thoughts. Do you want to start, and then we'll have everyone else weigh in?
Yeah, thank you, Nayala and Aleja, for this wonderful opportunity to be with the bishop and with Liz Rainier to address all these important issues. I would like to say this. We must, as followers of Jesus, we must be faithful to our call. And when I say that, I say it because even myself, sometimes I tend to give a little bit into cynicism and believing that we must just present a warlike attitude. And I will say that I think we must be prophetic. We cannot shy away from being prophetic and to name the evils that we are seeing coming out of the policies of the administration. And at the same time, I think we must keep in mind that we have a message that we are bringing to the world, a message of a different world that is laid out for us in the gospel by Jesus Christ. And we cannot lose sight of that. And so we must continue to educate, to proclaim this message of a different worldview, a worldview in which every human being is loved, accepted, cared for, without any difference among them. And so we must be prophetic. But at the same time, we must continue to educate our folks and educate our country and letting them know there is a different way. There is a different community. There is a different way of being community. And that's our task, to do that. At the same time as we are vocal, because we cannot be silent, we're vocal about the evils that we're seeing in our country today.
Thanks, Pastor Carlos. Bishop?
Yeah, people are talking about party politics or this is liberal denominations. Here's what I would say to that. What we're doing now is we're making pretty conservative arguments. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the rule of law, those are all fairly conservative principles, aren't they? And I also read somewhere that primarily our citizenship is found in the kingdom of God and not with the powers of the world. So there we have it. We're following the one who came to teach us a different way and in trying to embody the Beatitudes. I'd like to actually see people fight to have the Beatitudes put on the front lawn of a courthouse instead of the 10 Commandments. That would be interesting to hear conservative Christians talk that way. So here we are doing the thing that I think Jesus has called us to do. And it's really not liberal or conservative. I think it's just biblical.
Liz, as you're thinking about religious liberty going forward here in the legal landscape, final thoughts?
It's always terrible to be the lawyer going last after faith leaders.
You're not last, Aleja's next, don't worry.
Okay, good. Yeah, one of the big things that Law, Rights, and Religion Project tries to do is just it's interesting to hear you, Bishop Rowe, talking about religious liberty as a conservative value. I think it's definitely been also, claimed and used for so long, to protect a very narrow set of beliefs that I always like to say, religious liberty at its best should be about everyone, for everyone, right? And so that is, I would say our whole mission is to reclaim religious liberty as a fundamental value for all people, and including the non-religious, and that if you want to talk religious liberty and you want to hear more or you want to learn more, please, I'm very accessible. Come find me, come talk, and thank both of you for the incredible work that you're doing.
Thanks, Liz.
Likewise,
Aleja, you have 30 seconds. 'Cause I know folks are we said 3 o'clock. So if you want to just wrap up with your final thoughts.
Yeah, happy to keep it short. I'm mostly hoping to point people to more RNS reporting. I think the one bit that isn't in RNS is that I think someone mentioned the one case of ICE enforcement on the church grounds, church parking lot in Georgia, but there are 2 other reported cases of ICE enforcement around churches. One, another arrest in a parking lot, but also not necessarily ICE, but immigration enforcement stakeout that occurred in the parking lot of a cooperative Baptist fellowship ministry for English as a second language classes. So that actually, the cooperative Baptist fellowship already had that preliminary injunction at that point that they were not supposed to be experiencing immigration enforcement. So there's still some tricky stuff about where this is happening and where this isn't, and that is stuff that I just know as a reporter, but there's quite a lot of RNS reporting you can go to on our website to learn more about all of these lawsuits. We've done a lot of stuff in depth about each case. Jack Jenkins has an excellent primer from probably about a month ago about a bunch of the major lawsuits that maybe wouldn't
That's
include the
great.
latest one.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I just appreciated that Pastor Carlos mentioned his trip to the Darien Gap, which I did an article on last year. That might be interesting to people. So if they can look for that as well. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Aleja. You can head to rns.org for all of those stories if you're perhaps new to Religion News Service from this webinar. We will also include a link for you to sign up for our newsletter as well as future events in the email if all of you are here are registered. So that will be in the follow-up email. But I just want to thank all of you for joining us today, especially to our panelists and our moderator, Aleja. Thank you, Pastor Carlos, Bishop Rowe, Liz. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking part today. This has been fantastic. We appreciate it. Thank you.